We are going to get started. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining our webinar today. Really excited to have all of you future residents joining us today for what we feel is one of the most important conversations and informational sessions that you'll participate in during your time on the wait list, waiting for a home at RiverWoods Exeter. So a few housekeeping items. First, we have you all on mute, of course, but we do welcome your questions. And when it comes time for questions, you can submit them through the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of your screen. If you're using a tablet instead of a computer, you might find that Q&A box at the top of your screen. And I would ask that you hold off on submitting those questions until we get towards the end of the presentation, because we're going to be covering a lot of information today, and hopefully have anticipated many of the things that you're likely to be curious about. We always welcome your suggestions on how to improve these webinars. So if you have ideas on what would be of value to you, please shoot us a note or give us a phone call, because we welcome those suggestions. So my name is Lisa Clark. I'm sales manager here at RiverWoods Exeter. I have met many of you, but not all of you. Some of you are working with Dan or Chrissy, so I may not have had a chance to meet you yet. But thank you for joining us today. I will be walking you through a part of this presentation, and I am joined by Sue Fitzgerald, who is our move-in specialist. And Sue has a great responsibility here in terms of helping you, excuse me, helping you personalize your new home here at RiverWoods, as well as many other activities that get you from where you are today into RiverWoods. So Sue will be walking you through some of those responsibilities and actions that she'll be partnering with you on. I should mention that Chrissy and Dan are silent participants today. They are on, and they may be fielding some questions later on, kind of one-on-one for some of you waitlisters who may be working with them. So here are our goals today. We did a webinar like this, I think it was early 2022, I believe, and got a lot of really positive feedback about that, because there tends to be some confusion or lack of clarity about really how the process works once you're offered an apartment or a cottage here at RiverWoods. So our goal today is really to clarify that, as well as to provide updates, because we have had some processes change over the course of time since some of you may have joined our wait list. We have some new kind of refurbishment materials we use and things like that we want to update you on. And we also have sort of a more, I guess, better defined timeline for taking you through the offer process until you move in. So we're going to talk about all that. So updating you on the current offer process. We're going to clarify what constitutes an offer, because there's a lot of confusion around that as well. We get a lot of questions about exactly what is an offer. We'll talk about the timeline. So a frequently asked question we get is, how long do I have to sell my home? So we'll hopefully give you some insight into what you can expect. And then Sue will be talking about what design choices you have in your apartment or cottage. So what are the things that are allowable to do, what's not allowable, and what are some of those design choices that you will be able to make. And then Sue will also be talking about how you can prepare for your move into RiverWoods. I want to start with some definitions because there's a lot of different terms thrown around, and I just want to make sure that folks are clear on what we mean when we use certain terms. So we're going to walk through that before we actually talk about the full process. So first of all is notification. So when we talk about notification, it's when one of the sales counselors will contact you to say, hey, we think there's an apartment coming on, or we know there's an apartment coming on to inventory. We want to know when it's available. Are you ready and interested in receiving an offer on this apartment? So that's oftentimes when you get the phone call. It's when we know something's coming onto inventory. Final qualification. That's another term that we will use. The final qualification is the process of you completing the final confidential data profile, which we use to requalify you financially. There is also some health questionnaire paperwork within that. And we use that to have you come in and complete an in-person health assessment. So the final qualification includes both the financial requalification as well as the in-person health assessment. Offer. So the offer is when you have been qualified financially and had the health assessment, we are able to offer you an apartment or cottage, identifying the location and the name. Oftentimes that includes you coming to see it, but not always, because you may be somewhere remote and not able to get here at that point in time, in which case it might be a verbal offer or it might be showing it to you via Zoom. Personalization is the term that we use when you meet with Sue and you pick out what you want for paint colors, flooring, whatever other options, which Sue will walk you through. So how are you going to make it your home? So that meeting often occurs on the same day that we present you with the offer, but not always. Refurbishment. That's the term that we use for the construction process that occurs within the apartment or cottage to update that floor plan to reflect our current standards and the installation of finishes as requested by the incoming resident. Completion date. Completion date is also referred to as the closing date or the key connection date. It's when we have finished construction on the apartment, it's ready for occupancy, and it's the same date that the final entry payment fee is due and the monthly service fee begins. Then the last term, which is pretty obvious, is your move-in date. So that's the date that you have arranged with Sue for moving into your apartment. Sometimes that occurs on the same day as the completion date, but sometimes it doesn't. So that's why we call it out as a separate definition here. So let's talk about the timeline. We are now operating with generally within a 60-day timeline from the time that we offer you the apartment to when it's completed and ready for you to move in. Preceding that can be up to a 30-day window when we know something's coming onto the market and we work during that 30 days, might be 15 days, to get you, have you go through the final qualification process. So here are the key steps. First is getting the call. We work through the wait list for that particular floor plan, sequenced by the date that you've joined that wait list or made your deposit, I should say. And, you know, if somebody has told us they're 5 years out from coming here, we're not calling them. But generally, if you're within a shorter window than that, we're generally calling you if you've said you're interested in receiving opportunities. So we call the wait list to see who's ready to receive an offer on that particular apartment or cottage. Then we go through, once that person's been identified, we go through the final qualification process. We ask you to complete your financial and health qualification. And again, that's typically within the month prior to the apartment actually being vacated by the current resident. Once that's been completed, you've been qualified, we are able to then technically offer you that apartment, sharing the location and the name, where it is. And from that point in time, you've been fully qualified. We're giving you the option to accept an offer on it, and you have up to 3 days to tell us yes or no. That is the formal offer process. Next step would be the personalization meeting. That often occurs on the same date as the offer. And that's when you meet with Sue to talk about interiors, which she will be walking through shortly. Lastly, we have the completion date. The apartment's done. ready for you to move in. Oftentimes we're doing the key connection meeting on that date, but sometimes we're doing that remotely and having your entry fee wired to us through the banking system. That is when your final payment is due. And so roughly, Sue will talk a little bit more about this. Roughly, that's about a 60-day window from when you know we've offered you the apartment. That's when the entry fee would be due, and the monthly service fees would also begin. We're going to walk through each one of these steps again in detail. So there may be some redundancy here, but that is by design because it's a lot of information and we want to make sure that it is clear to you what happens within each step of this process. So getting the call, we like to say the call. When am I getting the call? Well, first of all, as I mentioned earlier, we work with you within the time frame you've identified. So you may recall that when you joined the wait list, we asked you how soon you thought you'd be ready to come live at RiverWoods. And so we put you in a category accordingly, whether it's you're ready anytime, you're ready in 1 to 2 years, you think you're ready between 2 and 5 years, or over 5 years. And it just helps us understand what is your sense of urgency in coming here. So we like to update that at least annually and touch base with you so that we can understand if anything has changed within your time horizon. It also helps us determine who we should be calling or not calling when an apartment becomes available. So we contact you both by phone and email to determine your interest in receiving an offer. And we want to know that day, are you ready or are you not ready and interested in receiving an offer on this apartment? Because we have a long list of people and a very short window in which we need to identify who is actually going to be interested and ready to receive an offer on this apartment. If you are interested and you say, yes, I'm ready, that's the one I want, then we reserve the home for you as you prepare to complete the financial requalification and the health assessment. If we call you and you say, you know what, it's really too soon, or that's not my first choice, or I just, broke my leg, can't move in now, no problem. We just move on to the next person. And that is just a conversation. That is not considered an offer. It's really just an inquiry that the sales counselor makes to ask, hey, this is an opportunity. Are you ready or are you not ready? So that is the first step. And again, that's happening usually within the 30 days prior to the apartment actually being vacated. And I say usually because it's not always that way. Sometimes we get well down the path with somebody, maybe 2 weeks into that 30-day window, and something happens. They don't qualify medically, they don't qualify financially, and then we need to go back to the list again and find someone else. So we try to do it as early as possible in that 30-day window to identify somebody, but sometimes things happen and we get further down that path, which puts a little bit more pressure on the timeline. The final qualification, again, we're preparing you to receive a formal offer on the apartment or cottage. Again, we're trying to make this happen within the 30 days preceding the actual vacancy of that particular apartment or cottage. So the sales counselor will send you the final confidential data profile. We now have it available to be filled in digitally. So we have a fillable form that we would email to you. If you're not comfortable with email, we can certainly, or completing it on your computer, we'll want to make sure you have one on hand, on paper, so that you'll have that ready to send back to us. So that's used to update your financial and your health information. And we ask that you have that back to us within 3 business days from the time we contact you. We like to use 3 business days, sounds like a long time, a short time. So we don't rely on the mail. We're going to ask you either to email it to us or to go to your nearby Staples and fax it to us. We'll need to obtain a copy of your current medical history forms, as well as a health summary from your physician. And we need that in hand 2 business days prior to your health assessment with our nurse practitioner. Then your sales counselor will schedule an in-person health assessment with the nurse practitioner, and we try to make that happen within the 1 to 2 weeks after you have received the call from us and said, yes, I am ready to go. Interested in this apartment or cottage. So it's a very short window, and I can't emphasize that enough, because we have gotten feedback from people who have just felt like it's going too fast. So I'm glad that you're all on today, because we want you to be aware of that and to be ready for that. So that might mean, you're asking your sales counselor now for that final application so that you have it on hand and you're ready to go. So if you feel like you're really ready to move when the call comes, it's good to have that on hand and ready to get back to us. So then we get to the offer. So an offer is made when you've completed the requalification process, and we'll provide you with a specific apartment name and location. And that could be made either in person or over the phone. Now, sometimes we'll be able to share the specific location of the apartment, but not always. If the person has not signed off on it yet and relinquished that apartment on paper, we're not able to share that. So hopefully we can, but not always. So really, sometimes it's saying we have a certain apartment floor plan style available. Can't tell you exactly where, but are you going to be interested in receiving an offer on it? So once we present that offer to you, you have up to 3 days to accept it. And if you want to move forward, then you meet with Sue and start the personalization process. Very often, this will occur on the same day, particularly for those of you who are coming from afar. We will try to schedule the health assessment, the offer on the apartment, and the personalization all in the same afternoon. Because we don't want you to have to drive, make return visits to campus if you're coming from, a few hours away. If you decide at that point you're not ready, you don't like the location of the particular apartment or cottage, that will count as your refusal. You have up to 3 opportunities to go through this very process before you will be moved to the bottom of that wait list. I will tell you that out of 100 offers, we might have 2 that decide it's not the right apartment for them. Very rarely happens. So most people are accepting that apartment or cottage upon that initial offering. I'm going to turn it over to Sue now, and Sue comes to us. She's not brand new on our team, but she joined us earlier this year, beginning of 2023. We were really excited to have her join us because she brings a lot of experience in the move management field. So she really, we felt, was a perfect fit for this particular role, but besides the fact that she has a delightful personality. So Sue, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about the making it your own.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody. As Lisa said, my name is Sue Fitzgerald, and I'm the move-in specialist here at RiverWoods Exeter, and I'm really excited to share with you what my role is in this process. And I hope that you will get a lot of information from this webinar today. So why don't we start with defining what my role is as the move-in specialist here. My first role is to review and to help you choose your interior finishes for your apartment or your cottage. I provide samples of the finishes. We've got flooring, we've got carpeting, we've got countertops, and all sorts of different things that you can look at when you come for your personalization appointment. So that's my first responsibility. My second responsibility, once we do the personalization process, is to act as a liaison between the refurbishment team and the incoming resident. If there are special things that you want for your apartment, I will get estimates for you, and I will just keep the conversation going between the refurbishment team and myself and the incoming resident, just so you're aware of what's happening. The third thing I do is to provide education about and support during the transition from your home to your new home at RiverWoods. And that can involve a lot of different things. As Lisa said, I have a lot of experience in the move management world, and downsizing and organizing is something that I did a lot of. So we can have some discussions during the time between your move around those kinds of issues. Another thing that I do is to help the larger RiverWoods community understand more about you. And the way I do that is by having you fill out a number of different forms, which talk about what kind of a car you drive, so we can register that and make sure you get a parking spot. Also, if you have a bicycle or a kayak that you want to bring with you to RiverWoods. But most importantly, I think, is getting some biographical information from you, where you went to school, where you grew up, whether you have children, grandchildren, what your hobbies are, what your interests are. And when you fill out the form that asks for that information, I write a quick bio and I send it to the larger community, and we share that with the larger community. So the existing residents have a way of getting to know you before you arrive, and hopefully can do a really good job of welcoming you into the community. And the last thing I do is to provide support during your move-in day. So once you've hired your movers and we've figured that all out, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, I will greet your movers on your move-in day. I will show them the best way to get to your apartment. I'll provide you with garbage bags so you have something to put your unpacking materials in. We also provide lunch for movers, which is always something that they really appreciate here at RiverWoods. And we also make sure that you are fed, and anyone who is working with you that day is also fed, to make sure that you have the energy to undertake the move, which can be really stressful and overwhelming. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of the architectural and feature updates from the community. In the Woods campus, we've added washers and dryers in most of the units, so makes it easier for you to get your laundry done. At the Woods in the Ridge, we've opened up the kitchens, so they are more open, and they look really beautiful. And in all the campuses, we've enhanced the overhead lighting, we've added stainless steel appliances, and we've added updated cabinetry. We have a lot of new standards. You can choose from beautiful designer-selected options at no additional cost, and those include, we have 3 quartz countertops that you can choose from, 3 types of granite countertops that you can choose from, a lot of different flooring. We have LVP, which is luxury vinyl planking, which has a cork bottom underlay, which makes it really soft to walk on. We also have porcelain tile in our bathrooms, and we have a number of different carpet choices. Some are pet friendly, and they're all in really beautiful neutral colors. We also use Sherwin-Williams paint, and we have 4 different neutral colors that you can choose from. But if you wanted to choose a custom paint color, something that you had at your home that you really enjoyed living with, then we can talk about that as well.
Sue, I want to interject something here,
Sure.
if you don't mind.
No, please.
So the architectural updates, particularly at the Woods and Ridge, when we built those 2 campuses, it was they were originally designed, the kitchens, to have a wall with a pass-through. I think everybody remembers the good old-fashioned pass-through, where you'd pass the dishes from the dining room into the person doing dishes. So as Sue said, we've taken those walls down, which gives the apartments a much more open, brighter, contemporary feeling. But the point I wanted to make is that we have not reflected all these on the floor plans, either on our website or in our floor plan booklets, or in the floor plans, the scaled floor plans that we might present to you when we're offering you an apartment. We give you a scaled floor plan with the little furniture cutouts. And we haven't been able to go through and update, our 40 odd floor plans to reflect some of those changes, not only the open kitchen designs, but the washers and dryers. So if you're looking at something online, or we've given you something and it shows, doesn't show the washer and dryer, or it shows there's a wall there, just know that we don't have 100% accuracy in those floor plans that we're sharing with you. And then there's other little things like, it may show a double sink when in reality we're using big single sinks now. So just if when you get a floor plan in hand, if you could just know that it's not 100% accurate. It should be pretty accurate in terms of the dimensions of a room, but there might be they might be outdated with some of these changes that we've made just in the past few years. Okay, I'll stop interrupting and move on.
That's okay. We can go to the next slide, I think. Yeah. Okay, so we've actually spent a lot of time upgrading, as we were just talking about. But sometimes people want something a little bit extra, and that's okay too. We can talk about what the parameters around that are. Oftentimes people will want things like a glass shower door, a custom closet, some custom electrical work. Maybe we have to relocate an outlet so you can mount a television on the wall, put in something like a ceiling fan, and all of those things we can discuss, and I can get estimates for all of those things because those additional items are at the resident's expense. And the other thing that I do need to mention is that we will ask you to fill out something called an alteration request form for anything that's customized in the apartment. And the reason we do that is because the people who are moving into the apartment after you, and I know that's hopefully a very long way off, may not want the same upgrades that you have chosen for your apartment. So we ask that you are responsible for removing those when you leave the apartment. So that's what that form is about. We, at this point, are not doing any structural changes in the apartment because we've spent so much time really thinking about how we would like them to look, and we're trying to stay very consistent with our floor plan. So we're not doing any structural changes. Excuse me. The other thing to know is that the average construction time is about 60 days. But if you are asking for a lot of custom items and those things add to the scheduled time, that we may be asking you to close on your apartment prior to the apartment actually being move-in ready. I think we can go on to the next slide, Lisa. Okay, so this is the fun part, the personalization process. So before I meet with you, I will send you an email, and that email will explain what we're going to be able to personalize in your particular apartment or cottage. And that email will have links to all of the different finishes. They'll have links to the paint colors. They'll have links to the flooring options. They'll have links to the countertop options. So at least you'll have a chance to take a look at those prior to coming in for your personalization meeting, just to become a little more familiar with what your options might be. So, and then the personalization meeting happens, and that often, as Lisa said, happens on the same day as your health assessment. And during that meeting, what we'll do is we'll review the samples of all of the things that are going to be happening in your particular apartment. We'll also discuss any of the non-standard requests that you have, and those are what we talked about before, whether or not you want a glass shower door, if you want a fan, those kinds of things. And then we'll also review the alteration request process for non-standard upgrades, the things that we also just talked about. And I really, really would like those decisions to be made within 7 days of the meeting. Some people come in and they're very definitive. They know exactly what they want. And we're able to make those decisions right away. But sometimes people want to take samples home and think about it a little bit. So, but 7 days is really the best timeline. Okay, so now this is a harder part of the process, which is preparing for your move. And this next slide is one that has a quote that we really like to read. And it says, "Much of what we acquire in life isn't worth dragging to the next leg of our journey. Travel light, you will be better equipped to travel far." And this really goes into our next slide, which talks about how to get ready to move to Riverwoods. The first thing I really like to talk with people about is to get creative. Start to envision how you want the next phase of your life to be, how you want to live, what you want your apartment or your cottage to look like. It may be that you have um, a painting that your great grandmother painted and you really just don't like it, and you think, oh, maybe I should bring it with me. But if you don't like it, then maybe don't bring it with you. Do you feel like maybe you want to become a minimalist? Do you maybe want to get a new bedroom set or maybe a new kitchen set? Think about all of those things. And I think if you really think purposefully about that, you really can start to envision what your new life and your new home is going to look like. And that leads us to the next step, which is downsize, downsize, downsize. And I know this is a really difficult process for a lot of people because we gather a lot of things in our lives and things that are really meaningful. So I understand that it can be a very challenging process. And it's also a process that takes a lot of time. So my best advice for downsizing really is to start with something that has absolutely no meaning to you whatsoever, like a junk drawer or something that really doesn't resonate with you. And then from there, you can begin to feel successful in downsizing. And that's when you want to start tackling some of the things that are more meaningful, like maybe your books or personal items or photographs, things like that. And do it in small doses because you can get overwhelmed really quickly. And especially if you set aside maybe 15, 20 minutes every day, you can actually get a lot done in that time frame. One of the other things that actually was recommended to us by a resident is to hire a realtor actually quite early on in the process. And the reason for that is because they can really help to advise you on whether or not you need to have anything repaired at your house before you put it on the market, whether or not you need some staging, which also goes back to downsizing. And you really can do pretty much everything other than take pictures and put the house on the market before, just to get ready so you don't feel like you have to rush. Another thing is ask for help if you need it. I'm sure that there are some friends, some neighbors, some children, grandchildren who might really be able to help you with the process. It's an overwhelming one to take on by yourself. But as Lisa mentioned, my background is in senior move management, and there are a number of companies out there that can help you with this process. So certainly reach out and I can refer you to any one of those companies that we have listed with us. The last thing is to hire a mover. And the one thing I do want to say about that is that I really recommend you get between 2 and 3 estimates for the move, and make sure that you're comparing apples with apples. Sometimes movers might add boxes onto the estimate and another mover might not. So one may seem more expensive. So read the fine print and figure out who the best mover is going to be. We have a list of those movers, which I can provide for you. But if you have a trusted mover who you've worked with in the past, you're certainly welcome to use them as well. Excuse me. Okay, now we come to the moving day. You will want to work with your mover, and you will always want to keep me in the loop in terms of scheduling your moving day. We only want one person to move in on a particular day, and that's because I want to be able to give you the attention that you need and you deserve on that day. We'd also really recommend that moves take place anywhere from Monday through Thursday. Friday moves we really discourage because we have limited staff here on the weekends. And if you're just arriving and you have a weekend as your first 2 days here, you may feel a little overwhelmed or lost. So Monday through Thursday is really ideal. I work with your mover. I check in with them a few days prior to their arrival to get their arrival time. When they do arrive, as I said, we feed them lunch because we want to make sure they have the energy to do what they need to do. And I show them how to get to your apartment. And I'm there sort of on call all day just to make sure that everything goes smoothly. And in addition to giving lunch to your movers or anyone who's working with you, we'll also make sure that you are fed so you have the energy to do what you need to do on that day. All right, now I'm going to send it back over to Lisa.
Great. Thank you, Sue. Okay, so apartment's ready. You're ready to close on it. I'm going to talk about that sort of financial part of it and logistics of closing on your apartment, which we call the key connection. So about 30 days prior to when your apartment will be completed, your sales counselor will send closing paperwork to you in the mail. This closing paperwork will include a statement, which will tell you the balance of the entry fee that is due on that completion date. You will also receive 2 copies of our disclosure statement. The disclosure statement is a big document that also includes our residence and care agreement that identifies the terms of your residency here. So we send you 2 copies for you to sign and return to us, and then we sign them on our end and send one back to you. There will also be other documentation in there, such as a form to provide your social security number so we know who, so we can report the interest that you've earned while you were on the wait list. And those documents need to be returned to us along with your payment for the balance of the entry fee. Need to be returned either by mail or delivered in person on the day of your key connection. We can again arrange to do all of that remotely, sending everything by mail and by bank wire if for some reason you are too far away to come here in person on that day. But those funds and that paperwork is due on the day that we have identified as your apartment completion date. On that day, if you're coming in, you will meet with the sales counselor to submit the entry fee if you haven't already submitted it by bank wire, and return those agreements if you haven't already mailed them. And you will meet with Sue, who will give you your keys. She will give you your name tags that you can wear now that you're a resident here. And she will also show you where your parking spot or spots will be on campus. Sometimes, but not always, we also have you meet with the community life team to get a campus orientation. More often than not, that meeting actually occurs the following week, because if you're having your key connection on the same day that you're moving, there's just a lot going on in your head, probably too much to be taking in what community life is going to be telling you about how things are run on that campus. But the community life team is an important important partner for you when you become a resident. And it's on this date that typically we're sort of passing the baton from the sales and marketing team over to the community life team, who serves as your contact point and your advocate once you become a resident. So each campus has a community life director. This is a picture of them. So we have Susan Marcella, who's at the Boulders campus on the left here. Kathleen Lefebvre in the center is the community life person for the Woods campus. And then Callie Soar is the contact for the Ridge campus. They also have number 2 people. So they have assistant community life directors as well. So between the 2 of those contacts within each campus, they're great advocates for our residents. So we're going to turn it over to questions now because that's covered the bulk of the information that Sue and I have to share. So I'm going to pull up the question queue, and I think I'll just go through this sort of sequentially. I talked about open kitchens, and we got a question from somebody about when will the boulders have open kitchens. The boulders was actually designed that way initially. So there might be one, depending upon the floor plan, there might be one supporting piece, but generally we didn't build pass-throughs there. It's a pretty open kitchen. So no changes at the Boulder campus. We have a question from somebody: if the apartment hasn't had the kitchen wall taken down, can you leave it? The answer is no. We're trying to be very consistent with our design of all of our apartments. Some people, it may be a little different than where they came from, but we're really looking to modernize our apartments, our interiors, and have a consistent look. We invest a considerable amount of money in refurbishing our apartments. So our goal is to keep that consistent and make it highly functional and beautiful. So let's see. The next question: is it possible to view the apartment before we confirm? It's hard to remember the choices. If you want to make an appointment and look at things before you're offered, that's fine. We will not show you an apartment before we offer it to you, however. So if you're feeling fuzzy on what things look like, I would encourage you to make an appointment with your sales counselor. The balance to pay is at the full price of the apartment. Yes, that is correct. That is the entry fee that is due. Is there a written version of this timeline? Well, we can certainly provide you with a copy of the slide. There's a question about slides from the webinar. Sure, we're happy to provide those. We have a question about underground parking for an additional fee. Absolutely, we do have that at the Ridge and the Boulders campus. You can talk to your sales counselor about that. We have a question about when we met with residents in their apartments or toured cottages, we saw things like non-white cabinets, wood floors, countertops. If a new resident wants something above the standard, is there an allowance for the standard and then pay the rest? Or is it like appliances where the new resident pays the total price? That's a complicated question. Typically, if you want to do upgrades, they are limited, but as Sue mentioned, sometimes you can pay the differential between what the standard was and what it would cost to get something different. But you also are responsible for paying to replace that or return that back to the standard upon moving out. Let's see. Just catching up here on questions. Okay. After the offer is made, the resident has 3 days to accept or reject. Is this 3 business days? No, that's generally 3 calendar days. So if you're offered something on a Friday, we want to know on Monday if you're going to accept the offer or not. We need to sell our home to pay the entry fee. What suggestions do you have for transitions out of the home until time to move into RiverWoods? I'm not sure I'm clear on that question. Usually people are able to align the timing between the sale of their home and the move into RiverWoods, but not always. Sometimes there's a little bit of a gap there, and some people have needed to store their furniture if they, for example, they have to move out before their apartment is ready here. We always encourage you not to actually list your home, put it up on MLS until you have a date from Sue as to when your apartment here is going to be ready. Generally, you can count on 60 days from the time we offer it to you. But if you've requested some custom things, it could take longer. With holiday periods, sometimes it might take 63 days or 65 days. So we encourage you to try to synchronize the sale of your home with the date that your apartment will be ready here. Let's see. Did that. Okay. Great question. If a unit was already refurbished, does the resident get to do it again? The answer is no. We are in the process now of doing almost everything that's vacated is being completely refurbished because our residents usually live here for 10, 15, sometimes 20 years. So things are generally either pretty worn or pretty dated cosmetically. So in many cases, we're doing full refurbishment, but there are many apartments that we have replaced cabinetry within the last 5 to 7 years. We use very high quality craft made cabinetry, and this is mostly at the Woods campus. So if we go into an apartment and there's very little wear on that cabinetry, we might choose to keep it. So that's one example of something not being replaced. But also, if you move into an apartment that we just did a full refurbishment on 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and it has beautiful granite countertops and it's got luxury vinyl flooring, we are not going to refurbish that again. But what we will do at a minimum is replace carpeting and repaint. And those would be the two choices you would have. So, when a sales counselor is speaking to you about a particular apartment, they can generally provide you with that information about, hey, this has been recently refurbished, so you're not going to have choices, or this is going to be a complete do-over. So they can generally give you that sense. We're trying really hard to use high quality materials and use a lot of neutral colors so that it does have broad appeal, the materials that we're using. So great question. Thank you for that. There's a question about the medical offices will be moving from the Woods. What's the expected time frame and length of time to refurbish the apartments? I think you're talking about the healthcare lodge. I'm not sure I understand that question, so we might follow up with you one-on-one on that one. What appliance customizations can we make? We are consistently using GE appliances, so we have standard appliances that we use in all the apartments, and that's kind of where we're at right now. They're beautiful stainless steel appliances. Here's a question. When initially joining the wait list, I chose one floor plan. I recently added another floor plan as the first choice. Does this affect my place in line? Your place in line on any wait list is always based on the date that you initially deposited. So if you change your preferences over the course of time that you're on the wait list, you will always be slotted in according to that original deposit date. We have a comment about 60 days is not a lot of time to sell a house, even if well prepared. Is there possibility of yearly notice? We think you'll come to the top of the list this year or similar. We're fortunate that we're in a time right now where it's pretty easy to sell a home, particularly if you live in New England. I mean, really applies to most any place, I think, in the US. The market's very strong. But this is why it's important to be ready and to be ready to move, to have downsized, to have identified your realtor so that when you get that call, you're more or less, ready to go. We would love to be able to give you an accurate estimate of when you will be called, but there's too many human factors involved to be able to do that. One being, we don't know when people are going to be vacating their independent living apartments and moving to assisted living. Number two, we don't know how the 20 people ahead of you on a list are going to respond when we contact them. People say they're ready and they're not, or people have a health event and suddenly they have much greater sense of urgency. So it's very difficult for us to say when you're going to receive a call. Now, when we know something's opening up, we will generally try to contact 3 or 4 positions down a list. And some of you have received these calls from us where we say, hey, something's coming onto the inventory that you're listed for. There's a few people ahead of you we're waiting to hear from, but if they pass on it, would you be ready and interested in pursuing it? If you start to get a call or two like that, you should know you're getting close. But again, it might be another year before you get a call like that from us. So there really are just too many human factors involved for us to be able to give you an idea of when we think you'll get to the top of the list. And I do want to say, if you're starting to feel anxious or concerned about how much longer you may need to wait, I would really strongly encourage you to contact your sales counselor and have a conversation with them about that, because Chrissy and Dan and I are aware of certain floor plans that may have shorter wait times, or they have fewer people on them, or we may want to have a conversation with you about being more flexible about what you will consider for a home here at RiverWoods and modifying what you're listed for, because we know there are certain floor plans that have very long wait lists and very long wait times. But it's really, I think, up to you to be letting us know, if you're feeling more anxious and really need to have more options on the table to get here sooner. Let's see. Another question about, are we going to have sufficient notification that we're getting towards the top of the list? Yeah, I can't speak for Chrissy and Dan, but I know when I work with my waitlisters, I try to give them once a year an update on where they are in line. But you might be, it's all relevant to how many or how many apartments we have of that particular floor plan. So you might be 15th on one list and 34th on the other. And sometimes we're getting, for a particular apartment, we might be getting 25 positions or 30 positions down a list before we find somebody who's ready. So that's the best we can do is show you kind of your relative progress year to year, moving up the list. But again, if you need to modify your listings because you're anxious, we can certainly talk to you about that. I also want to mention that some of you may want to update your financials and see if you qualify for something larger, or you may have concerns that your financial position has changed. And we're happy to do a requalification, even though we're not offering you an apartment. You could update your financials. We don't recommend you do that any sooner than 3 years from when you join the wait list, because we just have found that things don't change that dramatically. And if you do qualify for something larger at that time, you would just add to your deposit and we would modify what you're listed for here. I have a question about the health summary. What's required for paperwork? So there's two pieces. One is a health summary that you fill out. So it's just sort of a checklist of things that you fill out. The other thing we need is from your physician, and it's really just a list of medications, diagnoses, any diagnoses you have, and any immunizations you've had. It's pretty simple, usually with a phone call. They can fax it over to us. So it's not your detailed medical history, just very top line. And then there's also forms that we provide to you for you to fill out on yourself.
Lisa, if I can just interrupt for a second, I think the person was asking whether a nurse practitioner can fill out that paperwork as well. And I believe the answer to that is yes, if that's your primary person. Is that correct?
Oh, yes, that's fine.
Okay.
Yep, thank you, Sue. If the new buyer, this is a question about if somebody's moving into an apartment that somebody's made upgrades on. If the new resident likes the upgrades, does the former owner still have to take them out? And the answer is no. So if there have been upgrades made that somebody wants to keep, like let's say they put in a built-in media cabinet or something like that, the prior person, obviously there's no cost to them. So let's see. Sue, feel free to jump in if there's something that you're seeing that I haven't answered. Okay. We have a question about cottages and the layout of a cottage if the kitchen isn't open. We're pretty much leaving cottages as they are. Some of these cottages, again, the way the original resident chose, the options they chose at the time, because they were the first one in, were pretty much staying true to how that was designed.
Okay. I can answer the question about do we refurbish apartments after they are occupied? Example, in 10 years, update appliances, replace carpets. We will, at minimum, repaint and replace the carpeting, and we are putting in stainless steel appliances into all of the apartments now. So if there are, for instance, white appliances or black appliances in the apartment, we will change those over to stainless steel.
There's a question about somebody saw some units that had added shelving or bookcases. You're welcome to keep those. Those again are non-standard, but if you like them, you can choose to keep them. If you don't like them, we would ask the prior resident to pay to remove them. We have a question that's not really on the topic today about consolidated skilled nursing. So not really addressing that because I don't really have any updates for you on that topic. So I think we have gone through most all of our questions, which is miraculous. And we're right under the hour right now. So I hope this has been helpful to you. And certainly reach out to your sales counselor if you do have any questions. And we'd be happy to address those one-on-one. And thank you for your time today. We have recorded this, so we will be able to share that with you so you can listen to it again. And hopefully this has been helpful to you and clear to you. So thanks, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you.